Is the self an idea? From the last video, it seemed like many of you agreed it's ridiculous to think you can find a self in the brain or the self is somewhere in any form in physical reality because the self is an idea. It's not something that is physical. And interestingly, you can't find ideas in the brain either. But this reflects a very old philosophical debate between rationalism, which puts ideas as fundamental, and all of our experiences are poor copies of those ideas, versus empiricism, which puts our direct conscious experiences as the foundation of reality, and all ideas are poor copies of those experiences. So someone like Plato was a rationalist, because even if you're staring at a triangle, that direct conscious experience is a poor copy of the form, the eternal Platonic form, which is the perfect triangle which exists as an idea. So, and this is an important debate when it comes to the self, because if the self exists as an idea, we really have to explore whether we're rationalist or empiricist. And I'll get to that in just a second, but let's look at which of these two positions requires faith. Which one requires a belief? And so if we look at a few ideas, let's look at justice. Can you directly experience justice? Well, you can experience examples of it. And so if someone goes out and robs a store and then you see them, the cops take them away to prison, and you say, well, that's justice. But that's just an example of justice. Try as you might, you will never see or directly experience justice because you can't see or directly experience any idea. Same thing I talk about when I talk about ownership. Again, you may experience, or at least it seems like you experience examples of it, but you can never experience ownership because it's just a collective social agreement. Government, you can walk around capitals all you want and get into constitutions and all this, but you'll never, those are just examples of the government. You can never directly experience the government itself because it's an idea. So here's the challenge in this video. Can you directly experience the self? Now again, you can experience examples of the self. You can look in a mirror and say, that's my face, that's my arm, etc. But those are all, as I said before, those are all examples. They're not the direct experience of it and it itself. And so when we have direct experience, there is no requirement of belief. If you taste your tea in the morning, if you go out and such a beautiful day today and you got the sun on your face and I mean, there's no belief required. But here is where it gets interesting, because we know that expectation can actually influence your direct experience of reality. And is an expectation very similar to an idea or a belief? I mean, you can't directly experience an expectation, right? But you experience its influence on your conscious experience. So just to give an example, I talk about this one because it's just so funny. From when my daughter was young, maybe 4 or 5, and we were painting, sitting on the kitchen floor. And, you know, I had one drink in a solo cup, and we were also mixing the paints and cleaning our brushes in another solo cup. And I had picked up the wrong cup, and I took a drink. And again, it was very interesting kind of desert of the real experience because, of course, I had an expectation that it was wine, but then there was the direct sensory experience that conflicted with that. And it was a very interesting moment where I wasn't sure what I was tasting. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it just was the desert of the real. And then something clicked in the expectations department, and all of a sudden I realized I was drinking out of the wrong glass, and all of a sudden the paint water took on a very appealing flavor to me, and it just changed all like that. And we know from the entire field of perception that these expectations, these ghosts in the machine, if they don't exist, because we're talking about being empiricists now, and if they don't exist, how in the world do they manage to influence the direct experience of reality? And so same thing with the self. If the self is some kind of hallucination or thought and it has no empirical basis because you cannot directly experience it, how does this somehow bring in causal effects in the real world? Well, of course, the interaction is the problem. I mean, how does a ghost in the machine suddenly open up a door or change something in the real physical world, in particular, your conscious experiences? Well, the whole interaction thing, every bit of that problem goes away if you consider non-dualism, which is to say that there's only one physical reality. So if you go to Hinduism, there's one consciousness, and it plays by being everything that it isn't. So it plays at being selves and thoughts and these ghosts in the machine. And so there's only one, but it's in this drama, this Leela, this kind of show of adventuring off being what it isn't. And that fixes the problem. And then we've got another version. There's a version from the Old Testament. This is one of my favorites. Isaiah, I always quote this one because Alan Watts did. And it's a very interesting take on non-dualism. And it's, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and I create evil. I, the Lord, do all of these. And that's a really non-dualistic take, that there's only one consciousness that's playing at being what it isn't. And in the same way, the direct conscious experiences play at being what they're not, thoughts and ghosts in the machines, and that's how they end up having effects in consciousness itself. And so this really becomes an interesting pondering when you consider, okay, maybe I buy into some of that. Maybe this non-dualism thing does work it all out. But then we ponder if non-dualism itself is an idea or an experience.